Well, hi, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
I normally start with the same sort of question, and it's particularly apt, I think, with you because not only do you have an extraordinary back catalogue of work, you always seem to be looking for new creative outlets as well. So, could you tell me about a few of the projects you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, as a solo artist, I plot and plan and creative ideas come up and you start to get excited and then you consider the time frames that you have to deal with. So this whole crazy amount of great stuff that has been just piling on my lap kind of started before the lockdown. There was, the lockdown was a challenge for a lot of people, uh, and some people thrived. And I was one of those people that thrived through the pandemic. I had my own little home studio, and I was planning on working on a project that was the third installment of a trilogy of records that I started with a record called Real Illusions. And it's a big project. It's nothing like anything you've ever heard from me, the fans that know. And it was going to require a lot of people. And, that was impossible when the lockdown hit. So I started doing a lot of other things uh, that turned into my solo record in Violet. One of the other things I started in the pandemic was a project that I always wanted to do, which was a solo acoustic vocal project. I've collected many songs through the years that I've written that I earmarked for solo acoustic vocal, and that's me singing and playing relatively simple. It's not like a virtuoso thing. And I love that stuff. And my musical ear for those kinds of harmonies and melodies um, is different than the way I approach instrumental records or whatever. But at the same time, during the pandemic, I didn't have touring plans, but I did have plans to record about 4 hours of orchestra music that I've written through the years and have had performed in various capacities. But I wasn't quite happy with the performances. So I booked 3 weeks with the Metropole Orchestra in Holland and 2 weeks with the Tampere Philharmonic in Tampere, Finland. And those recording projects had to move because of the pandemic. But I finally accomplished it. And I went to these places and I spent that time and a lot of money. It's very expensive recording a 100-piece orchestra in a studio. But it was something I always wanted. Now I'm sitting on an almost completed acoustic record and a whole 4 hours of orchestral music. So, my plan was to get out on tour for In Violet, which was the studio instrumental guitar record that I made during the pandemic. And I did that and I finished that tour. And that tour took me to 194 shows in 51 countries. It was fantastic. It was just the best. And that took me till last Christmas. But then there was talk along the way of doing a tour with doing a G3 tour with Satriani and also doing a solo Satch Vai tour. So that kind of discussion started while I was on tour doing In Violet. So I love that idea, that's for sure. That was something I was waiting for my whole life. And I jumped, so that became my priority. And Joe and I were very excited about it, and we decided, yeah, let's do an American tour together. And then as we were discussing that, we started thinking, well, let's get some new music together. So when we tour, we have some new music, and next thing you know, I get an email from Joe. It's got these two amazing tracks, and they're very tied into our childhood because Joe and I we came from the same town. He was my guitar teacher from the ages of like 12 to 15, 16. And uh, so this is definitely something I wanted to do. And then we started writing, and it just was like, hey man, this is great, let's do a whole record, so now we're out here on tour promoting, just playing together, like I play for an hour, he plays for an hour, and then we come out and we do our one of the songs that we recorded together called The Sea of Emotion, and which we just released a video for that's pretty kooky and funny. So now, I'm working with Joe on new music for a whole record, because we thought, let's just do a whole record and just go out and do it like a really proper band tour. So I love that idea. But in the middle of all this, in the beginning of the pandemic, I got a call from Adrian Belew, and he had asked me if I was interested in going out and doing this King Crimson music. And I mean, that was like it just landed in my lap, and I'm like, let me think about it. Yes, but then the pandemic hit, and that was put on the shelf. And then by the time things started opening up, I really wanted to get out there and play. I had to tour for Inviolate, and that was almost it was like 19 months. So during that time, I started talking with Adrian more seriously, and we decided we wanted to do The Beat. And The Beat is the name of the band that is myself, Adrian Belew, Tony Levin, and Danny Carey from Tool. So like this band is filled with freakazoids, and they are such brilliant musicians. And my first thought when he asked me was, well, what does Father Robert think about this? Because I didn't want to get involved with something that didn't have his blessing, because that's disrespectful. It's his music, it's his guitar parts. It's his thing, he is the foundation of all that, in the sense that he started in 1969. I was 8, and I was very happy to hear that he gave it his full support, full blessing, and he even named the band. He suggested the name Beat, because we'll be performing music from the 3 King Crimson records of the 80s. And that era and those 3 records, I mean, they are so beloved by, Crimson fans and a large audience, because it's just such great accessible music. Adrian Belew, man, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. I got to tell you that. I mean, he is so brilliant. I'm listening to this music. I'm meeting with him. He is quite a powerhouse, man, and I can't be happier than to have a guitar buddy like that. I think we complement each other beautifully, because we're very different, but we still have real quirky personality. So as you can imagine, I had to juggle all of this opportunity. So we booked this Beat tour, and at the end of this Satriani Vi tour, it'll be May, and Satch is going out with Sammy. I'm preparing for Beat, and then I'm out with Beat for the rest of the year. So Joe and I have to kind of figure out how to, make that record. But we have time in January and February also. But then all of 25 and 26 is booked with tours for me, almost virtually back to back. I'll be 66 by the time I get off tour, literally.
I mean, interesting that kind of leads on to one of my next questions, actually, because I mean, you always seem to have such a prolific touring schedule. You're always working, always on the road. Have you got any tips for sort of aspiring musicians, first of all, for preparing for a tour, but also for surviving the road?
Yeah, I've been doing it for 44 years. The experience you have on tour is joined at the hip with your attitude about touring. So the quality of the experience you're going to have on tour is up to you. And that's something I learned. And it's not, of course, there's going to be challenges. Of course, you're going to try to at times figure out, how am I going to sleep? Where am I going to? And what worked for me through the years, and in the beginning, my first tour with Zappa, after those tours I did with Frank, I thought, I'm never touring again. It was just too difficult, the way that Frank toured. I mean, we had you had to get up at 9 a.m. and get to the airport, fly to the next gig, go directly to sound check, have a 4-hour sound check right up to the time the doors open. And then you had to know 80 songs in the repertoire, and 60% of them were death defying on the guitar. And then you do 2 shows. And by the time you get back, so you have to, it was a tour like that. That's rough. But really, to have an experience on tour that makes it a fulfilling life experience, because that's what you want, because life is about collecting experiences. I mean, you can verify that. It's not really about what you own and your status and all that stuff. It's about the experiences that you have and the quality of them. And touring can be an exceptionally great life experience. When I started touring, and this is what I would say, you'll find things to complain about. If you're an unhappy, kind of miserable person, you'll be really miserable on tour. So one of the things that helps is you got to catch yourself when you're complaining about shit all the time, and find things that you like about touring. See, when I go on tour, what I look forward to, and I know it might sound crazy, but this is how I carved my psychological brain muscles for touring. You write a list of the things you like, so for instance, I really like being with my friends on tour. I like playing on a stage and connecting with people. I like traveling and going to all these different countries and feeling their culture and tasting their food and experiencing their art and just the whole collective environment of a whole different country. You will discover that it almost has nothing to do with anything you've learned on the news or in school. You have to go and appreciate these places and the people. If you look for the good in people, you'll find it. If you're just complaining about the shit that makes you miserable, that's on you. And you'll be miserable. So it's your choice. So when I go on tour, I love it because I resonate with those things that I like. And all you got to do is find something you like a little bit and throw yourself into it, and it gets really big. The quality of your touring experience is an inside job.
I think that's a really, really good perspective. And also, I suppose, for the preparation point of view, I mean, again, you may have answered the question, having to learn 80 Frank Zappa tunes. Learning the set for the King Crimson material, which is obviously pretty challenging as well. Is that kind of
That's a book right here. It never leaves my side. No, when I get requests to do a particular jam song or something like that, I listen to it. Okay, I got it. Not this stuff. I mean, look at this. I'm just looking at right here, this one piece. This is one piece. And you have to consider how Robert Fripp is a scientist. I mean, his technique and his sense of timing and all is just otherworldly. And I mean, he'll be doing these lines, that have nothing to do with the time signatures of what everybody else is doing. So like you get this, and everybody knows this one. I'm looking at a song called Frame by Frame. And there's this one part after the intro, which is brutal and relentless. Okay. It doesn't let up. It's the most challenging thing I ever had to do. And then you get to something like this where, you know, him and Adrian do these beautiful lines together, and then Fripp will drop an eighth note over the, you know, he's playing in six over, you know, Adrian's seven. So you can't listen to that and then get it, especially when the guitars sound the same. It's a like a mirage, you know, it's like a hallucination what's going on. So I love this stuff because it sounds so beautiful when you get it right. So I want in, you know, that I love studying music. It was one of my favorite things when I was with Frank, you know, studying the music and learning it and doing my best to perform it the way the composer intended. Of course, with my own flair. I mean, with the beat stuff, I don't play like Robert, you know, but I can respect the parts in a Steve Vai kind of a way. You want to be prepared, you know. If I ever have reoccurring nightmares, it's about getting on stage and not being prepared. And actually, that's that's one of two reoccurring nightmares I've had. Is that 40 years later, I'm on stage with Frank and he's counting off like the Black Page or something, and I'm like, wait a minute, you know. Another thing, and if you can't remember anything about touring, this is something good to remember, and it can take some practice. You want to support your band members. You want to be you want to be a sense of support for them, and it can be a challenge because some band members are insane. You know, they're just not happy, and you know, one bad apple on a tour can really affect the emotional equilibrium of the whole tour. So you want to be that guy that doesn't allow that to happen by supporting them, you know, and supporting another, it's simple. It's just etiquette, you know, it's like complimenting something they did that you saw them do on stage that was really cool, you know. There's simple things that you can do because you're going to be living with these people and there's no secrets at sea. You get to know everything about each other, you know, and it can be a very holy relationship in a sense, you know, but it's again, it's up to you, but that will change the whole experience for you. It's hard because some people just are stubborn and unhappy. And, you know, they'll hear my words and it won't mean anything. But for those on the fence, being a source of inspiration for others while on tour will change the collective environment, the emotional dynamic of the collective environment for the whole tour. And trust me, a tour is like a chunk of your life, okay? And it doesn't matter how many records you're selling, how many people you're playing to, how much money you're making. If that experience is a bad experience, that's what you get. That's what you have then. You know, you may have money or whatever, but really, at the end of the day, life is about collecting experiences. So that's why keeping a good attitude is everything.
I've sort of noticed over the last few years, you seem to have got increasingly involved in guitar education, you know, with things like Videology, the book, and through your Alien Guitar Secrets clinics and things like that, and also the Vi Academy.
Oh, absolutely. You know, that's one of my favorite things to do because I had so much great inspiration when I was young. and I see how it helped me and it affected me. I had incredible music teachers. I've had experienced band members that taught me. I've worked with great experienced artists where I learned much more about uh, the business, the etiquette, the finances, everything. So I try to teach what I know through experience because you can teach it, but people have to go through it. So I kind of give pointers. I try to give pointers of things that worked for me. And as far as the educational aspect of playing, I love doing that too to anybody that's interested.
You came to ACM in 2009, and we set up the Steve-O Guitar Studio shortly after you did your Alien Guitar Secrets clinic there. Um, I've got one of the guitars from there here.
All right.
Could we talk a little bit about your ongoing relationship with Ibanez Guitars?
Yeah. Well, the company itself, in the very beginning, they made quality instruments, but I think their potential was more based on where they could go once they started collecting quality artists. Not that they were collecting bad quality artists, before guys like me joined, but the ideas that come from the artists that they work with, they're incredible at making it right. Like they exceeded my expectations with quality uh, all through the years. I mean, that's like one of their things. They don't mess around. This has got to be a good instrument, whatever it looks like, whatever. And I do have a bit of the Vi advantage, in that I've been there so long. Everything I've done with them has been wildly successful. It's amazing, it's like living a charmed life, all the great stuff I did with them. And they're also very creative. So when I came up with a crazy idea to build the Hydra, I sent them all the things I wanted it to include, and a bunch of photos of some steampunk fashion. I said, I want it to kind of look something like this, but it needs to have blah, 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 blah. And man, they just sharpened their knives and went for it. And they built that thing. It took years and a lot of going back and forth, but I knew that once I got that guitar, I had to honor them and my imagination and create a piece of music that was utilize that Hydra to the best of my ability, and that's when I wrote Teeth of the Hydra. And they've just been so supportive. They make great instruments and they're very supportive.
I mean, you do always seem to be pushing yourself musically and technically. Have you got anything you're working on at the moment?
That's what I'm working. And every now and then I look up to the cloud of Father Robert Fripp. Yeah, I'm just, can you help me here? um, I'm so overloaded with projects sitting on the shelf and obligations. But if my mind goes to a creative place, it's for Joe. This thing I'm doing with Joe is so fantastic. It's like it's scratching an itch I couldn't reach my whole life, because Joe is he's so musical, he's so brilliant, and to enter that creative space with somebody that's so in tune is just like a playground. It's like a glorified divine playground. And So my mind immediately rushes to what can I do with Joe? What idea, what do I get? What do we got? What do we got? And let me tell you, brother, the shit is hitting the fan. There is some great stuff going on. And now also there's a pull uh, because I came up with this little, well, I'm going to show you, but I came up with this song and it had beat written all over it, So now I'm like, uh-oh. And I played it for Adrian and he's like, okay, all right, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, wait. Let me make sure that I have time to eat.
Can you tell me your approach to transcribing when you were working for Frank Zappa?
Well, the stuff I had to do with Frank it varied quite a bit. It was everything from going through his entire catalog and make sure everything had lead sheets so that Washington had a copy for copyright, and much of it didn't, to transcribing whole ensembles like the Roxy record, the whole record, every note I transcribe. And then there's like a task he gave me to put together a final score for Gregory Peccary, which was this massive, incredible piece of Zappa music that was in all different pieces all over the place. Because Frank wouldn't, some of it would be composed, some of it he would tell you, some of it he would just do as any means necessary. So it was my job to go in and say, okay, here's something that has everything, But the bulk of my work with Frank was guitar transcriptions and drum parts. So I would transcribe him and Vinny doing these crazy, outlandish things, And you can see all that in the Frank Zappa Guitar Songbook. Some of the most complex rhythmic notations ever. And I can only say that based on everything I've ever seen. And I collect music scores from everybody, So that was pretty much the way that I would approach each one of those could vary because I didn't get separated tracks. I had to really listen. But the guitar stuff, I could kind of do most places because it had tones. I don't have perfect pitch, but I have a relative pitch. So I could, if I just know the key, everything I hear, I know what it is, So a lot of the transcribing I could do on airplanes, in hotel rooms,
I mean, do you think that ear skills are one of the most important skills for a musician to develop?
I don't think they're one of the most. I think they're the most. Your ears are everything because everything starts and stops there. The way you hear music. Now, this does not mean you have to be a great transcriber or that you have to, the ears work in various, I'm going to split your ears into two kinds of dimensions. There's the listening to the outside world. You're listening to a guitar part, you're listening to chord changes, and you're writing them down. And this is great training because some people would be surprised how they may already have a great gift for hearing music in analytical form. Like, oh yeah, that's the one chord, that's the flat 2 major 7 chord. Oh wow, I know this, and it's just a little bit of understanding of just some musical language and listening. So that's outside listening. If somebody here, so that's listening outside. Now that's a particular skill, and I know people that have that. I know people that have intense degrees of perfect pitch. And they can do that stuff easily. It's like they don't understand why it's a mystery for anybody else. But they're not good musicians. And some of them aren't even musicians, because the creating of music comes from a whole different listening dimension. Okay. So this is why I say you don't need to, most musicians are intimidated by transcribing and music and little black dots and all the scales and the modes, and all this stuff. Uh, it's always my stance that it can be very helpful to learn at least the basics. And you got to know at least the basics. You got to know the notes. You got to know the chords. You got to know the scales. You don't gotta, but it helps. But none of it can be useful and helpful when you go inside to listen. But going inside and listening actually doesn't require any information. It just requires your ability to use your imagination to hear your inner musical voice speak a melody to you. And that's how it works. I'm verbalizing that, but if you talk, that's what happens with Prince. That's what happens with everybody, or everybody. The person sitting next to you in your class, if they want to write music, there's two ways to do it. One of them is the approach that's in the mind. It's in the head. It's academic. It uses everything that it knows from the outside world to build kind of conceptual things. But then there's another way of doing it, which is much more effective. And that's by listening inside and finding things as you're playing. The academics can be helpful, but the moment you start using them to fascinate yourself, you can miss out on a more authentic way to bring a melody into the world. So you want to find a good balance, though, because both are helpful. And if you with trained ears, you can translate what you're hearing in your head more effectively. Make sense?